Welcome to the Energy Transition Technology Chat. I'm joined today by Dr. Fridrik Larsen, CEO of LarsEn Energy Branding. Fridrik, welcome and thanks for taking time to have a chat.
Thanks.
Fridrik, for people who don't know you, can you do a quick introduction?
Well, I'll start with my PhD. I did a PhD in energy branding, and I chose it because I foresaw the same changes within energy as in telecoms, and I wanted to be ready with relevant knowledge to the energy space when the industry needed more information about the customer. So I researched customers around Europe to find if they were different from those who buy traditional consumer goods, and if they were different, how they were different. And this I've published all of this. I've published a book on Amazon, and I've published, of course, my thesis. And I work for companies around the world to help them become proper brands. And I also host a conference yearly called Charge, where I bring people together where we talk about how energy companies can communicate effectively.
Now, Fridrik, we met, I think, for the first time about 3 years ago, and the whole concept of Charge and the conference you were running intrigued me. So I was there 2 years ago. I missed last year, but I was back there, and folks that know us and follow us will have seen that we were busy at Charge 2019 in Reykjavik. You mentioned that you've been organizing this. I think was this the 4th edition of Charge?
Yeah, this was our 4th edition. And it's quite interesting that we've already done 4 years, because I feel like the first year was just yesterday, basically. And you've been following this from the beginning. But my idea, because I've been speaking all over the world about energy branding, and I thought, okay, now it's time to bring people to one place to talk about it. And it was really a crazy idea to host a conference about something nobody was talking about in an exotic country like Iceland. People feel like it's too far away, but it's actually not. It's placed right between America and Europe. So we have 20% of our attendees are actually Americans. And then we have Asians, we have, for Australia, or we have Oceania. So we have really a mix of people which are pioneers at mind, if you will, willing to learn about next level in energy.
This was my 2nd year. And what I find fascinating is that, as energy events go, it's a boutique event. It's niche. You have about 500 people at the event, but you have such a range. You have CEOs all the way down to branding, marketing, engineers, new technologies, startups, and as you say, it's from across the globe. So it's fascinating to see the different perspectives when it comes to branding and energy.
Right.
Now, we're going to come back later on to a lot of the work that you've done in terms of, how do we distinguish what a good brand is and stuff. But let's just jump in terms of, so this was your 4th edition.
Yeah.
What were your key takeaways from Charge this year? What was different?
Well, this is a good question, but, just to backtrack a little bit, when we started, we wanted just to explain what energy branding is. And from a conceptual level, we had a lot of CEOs from around the world that talked about their vision of it. But as the years have progressed, we want to show people more how to do it. So that's why we were doing this. We had some more workshops, and we looked at it from different angles, from an innovation angle and a sustainability angle. But my main takeaway, and I've thought about this a lot actually, at Charge, we award the world's best energy brands. And we have a big panel, which you know about yourself, being part of it. And we ask also those who are shortlisted, and they can only be shortlisted if a big panel names them. They have to send out a survey to their clients, and because the brand lives in the mind of the clients. It doesn't matter what I think or you think or a company thinks. It matters what our clients think. So on stage, we awarded those who were the best ones, and I asked all of them why they deserve to be the world's best energy brands, those who were won in different categories. And the main takeaway from that exercise was human. So they thought that they had a human approach to things. They really treated their clients like human beings, not like meters or end loads. So my main takeaway, if you want to be a good brand, be human. Of course, use all the tech out there, use bots if you have to, but above all, be human. and be unafraid to do it. But that's what the energy space has been unafraid to do. And they don't even refer to their clients as people of flesh and blood. So that's my main takeaway.
We in the industry, we keep talking about the customer and the meter number, and it's not humanized. You know, one of my key takeaways was, I think the word love. I don't know how many times the word love popped up in presentations during the 2 days, mostly from folks in the industry. We need to show, you know, the love for the customer, but it really was customer centric. And, you know me, people that know me, I spend all my time looking at new technologies, and I find that fascinating. And I'll be honest, I'm an electronic engineer, so me is technology. And down through the years, when people would start on to me about branding, you know, the eyes would glaze over and I'd be like, oh yeah, here we go. But I'll be honest, when I was with Compaq and with Intel, I got to see the value of having a reputable brand. You know, it gets you out of all sorts of fun and games. Yeah. And I remember one of the things when I met you first, and you started on about branding energy, and all I could think of was like cool ads about what some of the energy companies do in terms of, aren't we cool? We've got whatever, we make energy, or we sell energy, or whatever. And then you started on about measuring what matters. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that leads us on to, you mentioned the awards, but you also have, it's not a subjective process that you go through. It's quite analytical. Mm-hmm. You have the EBBI. What's this EBBI?
EBBI. It's a tool that measures how strong a energy brand is from a positioning perspective. That is, from the consumer's mind. It's a tool that I started to work on while I was doing my PhD. And I've started to continue developing it through my academic side. So I'm also a professor of marketing at the University of Iceland. And I've had some students that, you know, took it up, tested and retested. So now we have a tool that measures how strong energy company is from the consumer's mind. And this is different because a lot of companies are measuring, but they are not necessarily measuring that brand. They are measuring Net Promoter Score, which is a fine thing. It says if people are recommending you. They are tracking the image, which is also fine, and they're using all kind of brand tracking. But if you don't measure it from a positioning perspective, you're not really getting the whole picture. I use the analogy of an elephant. If a blind man goes to an elephant and touches the nose, they will describe a snake. So you have to measure. You have to touch the feet, and you have to touch the tail, you have to touch the tooth, you have to touch the nose. That's what this tool does. It measures holistically how strong a company is as a brand.
And what we're going to do now is look at a video that gives a bit more of an explanation on what this whole tool does. So here we go.
Okay.
Now, Fridrik, the one key thing here that struck me with this tool, I've seen interbrand, I've seen all sorts of, as you mentioned earlier, there's lots of ways of measuring brand value.
For sure, yeah.
This is different. You talk about measuring your brand value in terms of how your customers see you. Why is that so important in the energy world?
It's a good question, but the EBBI is relevant because it measures a brand holistically. And it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks except our customers. So you have to measure what they think so you can align your positioning strategy properly. And that's what the EBBI does. And another problem too, in energy in particular, there's often a large disconnect between identity on one hand and image on the other hand. Identity is what I think about myself. Image is what you think about, image is what others think about me. If we'll talk about this from a company perspective, let's say there's a big company that I used to work for. I work for still actually. It's one of those major utilities. Everybody knows them. They're in 30 countries and they're giants. And we were introducing the concept of branding to the board because we said you have to spend money on this. If you want to stay relevant moving forward, you have to be a strong brand. So we did an exercise with them. We said, okay, if you were an animal, which animal do you think that you would be? And they said, well, we are rich, we are strong, we're leading in the world, so we are elephant. Elephants are strong, but we also have a lot of money, so we can buy up innovation, we can hire the best people, so we are agile, so we are cheetah. Strong as an elephant, fast as a cheetah. That sounds pretty good, I'd say. So we went out and asked the customers. So this was the identity, but the image. This did not match the identity because the clients, they said rats, snakes, or reptiles of various sorts. So there's a lot of mismatch between identity and image. And if you think something of yourself and you talk to your world like you think that everybody perceives you, you will just talk in a cross. It just doesn't work. So that's why you have to measure your brand, because you have to see how people perceive you in order to talk to them efficiently, in order to spend your marketing money wisely, in order to stay relevant, basically.
And the other key thing that I find fascinating with the tool is it allows you to benchmark yourself against others, because it's not done in a vacuum.
Yeah.
How that's through the EBBI score?
Yeah, it's the energy markets are very geographical. And you might be thinking that you're doing fine in your home market. It isn't until you compare yourself against the best when you know that you're actually not scoring so high. And what does it mean to score a 7 on a 10-point scale? It doesn't mean anything until you fix that to others. So if you know that you're scoring a 7 and you thought you were doing good, but you find that the world's best are doing a 9, then you have to learn from them somewhere. You have to do something differently. So you want to benchmark against the best all the time. And this does not, of course, not only applies to branding, it applies to everything. We should break down everything that we do in our value chain and benchmark against the best in all places. But what the EBBI does, it has the ability to compare yourself against the world's best, your continent, your country, or your close competitors. So you want to benchmark against them.
Now, one of the interesting things in the energy industry, as I've come into it over the past decade, is that you typically hear from energy companies, but we're different. And you mentioned, it's different in every geo. And look, we can't compare ourselves to the guys over there because we're different over here. How is that relevant?
Well, it's a valid point to talk about commodities being hard to differentiate, because commodity has a very few differentiating features. But it doesn't mean that you cannot. All the empirical studies show that if you do use the principle of brands, you will make more money. So if you choose not to do it, you'll effectively losing money. You might as well burn your money, basically. But this being a fact, as much as anything can be a fact in this world, at least it's empirically shown that ROI increases if you do it properly, then energy space is just like any other space. We must use those methods also if we want to stay relevant.
And for companies that have engaged you with EBBI, is this something that you run continuously, or is it something that a company would go off and, okay, I'll benchmark myself today, I'll do all the surveys with my customers. Yeah. Do I come back in 6 months? Do I come back in 12 months?
Yeah, it's enough to do it every 12 months, basically. That's what we think. You don't have to do it you don't have to benchmark yourself monthly or bi-monthly. But that depends on the organization and your goals. If you are working on a campaign and you want to measure the result, how you did, spend $1 million or €1 million or something, you want to compare after the campaign, maybe you want to do it more often. But we set it up that you do it every year or so, because it's a rather thorough questionnaire. It's not just one, like Net Promoter Score, NPS is just one question. This is 35 questions. So you don't want to be bombarding your clients too often with it. But once a year is enough. But maybe one other comment about your question about differentiation. I very often get the response that, okay, we are a B2B company, so we don't really need branding. We all know all our clients. And that's also a fair point. In B2B, then personal relationship and just calling people might be very important, and it's more important so than in B2C. But my typical reply to that is nobody's been fired for buying an IBM. So people buy brands, and you of course come from Intel. You know all about ingredient branding. So it matters for sure also in B2B.
Well, that was one of the takeaways from me from the charge a couple of weeks back. Yeah. There was more people talking about the B2B to C, and depending on where you are in the food chain, then it may be that I don't sell directly to the end customer because of the way the market is set up in that region or whatever. So there was a lot more talking about how do we, this kind of ingredient brand, we generated the energy and why do you buy it from us, and energy, renewable energy certificates, and. So I found that fascinating in terms of it was kind of moving away, or it was a shift that I've seen in the last couple of years from, well, to back to your point, we're a strong identity, we have a strong brand. But the consumers were, whatever the analogy you used earlier, that in many countries, the energy companies don't have a good reputation, right? Even though they have a strong brand.
Yeah.
And I remember, now, do you think it's changing? What I call it. I remember years back when we met first, you were on about, energy branding is the missing element in your success.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you answer first. Is it changing?
It's becoming more relevant. I mean, if you choose not to do it, you are opting out of a chance to run your company better. And so it's definitely, I mean, of course, it's not the only thing. If you talk about dependent variables or independent variables, so you cannot say that if you are a better brand, you'll sell more at the end of the day, because there are so many factors that are involved in running a company. If you take things like trust, for example, if you're a strong brand, trust increases, and with increased trust, you have increased, you have a higher customer retention rate. You have people willing to talk more nicely about you. They are less receptive to price changes. They will be willing to pay a higher price. They recommend you to others. So you can definitely identify the value of a good brand in your business, but you can never say I'll sell more because of it, because there's so many variables, basically.
And many of the discussions we had in the last couple of weeks and whatever at the event, people were, if you look at the energy industry, if you're a utility, you got to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And regardless of how cool your brand is and the brand value and if your uptime is really poor and people are always have power cuts, you can have as much branding campaigns as you want and people are not going to be that happy.
Yeah.
But what I have seen, and it is quite fascinating, is that, as you say, if you're trusted, if the lights do go off, sometimes you get a bit of leeway. Look, the world hasn't ended overnight, so they give you some leeway to get it back. Now, obviously, if the lights keep going off, then you've got a bigger problem. But it is quite fascinating to see the way the brand loyalty. And one of the presentations at the event was talking about that. I think we were asked from the stage, how many brands do you think about when buying a car? So I instantly kind of said, well, I probably have 10 brands.
Yeah.
And then they went through all the studies and said, well, actually, research shows that there's probably maybe one or two that you actually will purchase. The rest are just background noise.
Yeah.
So that was quite fascinating in that the impact that having a good brand can have on you.
We just simply, as consumers, we just don't have time or mental capacity to be thinking about 10 options and everything that we do. We normally narrow down to 2 or 3. So the rest is background noise, as you say. So getting to becoming one of those 2 or 3 that customers choose from is actually, it's a big thing actually, because if you're not part of those good brands out there, you'll just never be considered. You'll just never move towards anyone willing to, purchase from you. So that's what a brand does also.
Now, one of the questions that popped up during the conference, asked from the floor a couple of times, was that, but hang on a second, we're basically selling electrons, and it's a commodity. And you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
there was some people would look at it and go, "Asher, look, it's only an electron. We can't brand an electron, so you're branding a commodity. Why bother?"
Yeah.
How do you answer energy execs that say, "Look, Asher, why bother?"
Well, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. When I started my PhD, I was accepted into a prestigious UK school. And it's actually, at the time, it was #1 in research activity in the world on a PhD level in marketing in my field. And I was really glad. And then I came in and I said them, and I had decided what I wanted to write about. I had told them I wanted to write about energy branding or commodity branding. And they told me, "Well, Fridrik, you cannot brand a commodity. You have to write about something else." That was a little of a shock for me, but I said, "Well, I came here from my country. I'm paying my own way. I will write about this. If I'm not doing it here, I'll do it somewhere else." So this is 2008. So it's 11 years ago. It's not long ago, but the academia hadn't caught up then. It has, and it's really much in the same place. So I can understand why company executives would say that. This is just not their frame of mind. And branding doesn't have airtime, with the executives. The boards don't talk about it. They talk about operational stuff. They talk about things that matter. They don't talk about that soft stuff like branding. But and I always remember the first time I went to the States on a conference. The very first thing I did in the States after I finished my PhD, and I came to America where people understand brands. And I told them what I was doing, energy branding, and they didn't really care. The only thing they said was the ROI of your services. And I wasn't prepared for the question because I thought really the Americans would understand, but they just did not care. So I went back and did a little bit of a homework just to see exactly if you are spending money on branding and you do it properly, what's the ROI? And the outcome is so astonishing that it's up to 12%. So if you choose not to do it, again, it's like burning money. And the next time I speak on stage, I should actually take a bit of money with me and burn it. You can choose to do this, or you can choose to keep that money and run your company more efficiently. But I understand it. They are just not used to this kind of thinking. And it's an engineering-driven business. And people learn different things in natural sciences than in social sciences. So as an engineer, you're trained to do things a certain way. As a marketer, you're trained to do things in a certain way. And it takes a little time for the energy space to catch up. But they don't have a lot of time. They just have to do it because the newcomers that will come into the space, they know these tricks. And that's the Googles and the Amazons and the Teslas. And they know how to do it. And there was research that was done a couple of years back. And people who asked if you could buy Apple Energy, would you do it? And up to 60% said, yes, I would. They'll get the same electrons. They'll get exactly the same thing. The difference is the brand. So brands do matter.
Now, with all of the recent society changes, and all for the good, in my opinion, and you have the whole thing around the Friday for Futures, do you think that's going to start changing some executives' minds in terms of, God, we do need to be seen as a responsible brand, a sustainable brand, a responsible brand?
Yeah, it will change. It's again, it's not a question of choice. It's if you will be an unsustainable brand in 20 years time, let's say 20 years, it's a long time, 10 years even. If you are not, you'll be frowned upon. You'll be the odd one out. And so companies that are, sending out sustainable messages or green messages today, they are doing it to be different, like to differentiate themselves from the rest. But moving further along the way, 10 years, it's not going to be, everybody has to do it. So today it's a point of difference. In 10 years, it's a point of parity. You have to do it. So it's not, so it is, and all the future generations and Greta Thunberg, those who are coming afterwards, they think differently. They will choose with their wallets. They will not just say, I am green. They say, I am green, and here's my money to prove it. So if you want to persevere, if you want to live as a brand, you have to, get younger clients. Those generations coming, then you have to change.
The other thing that popped up quite a few conversations during the event was that, having a good energy brand and being seen as a leader, it's obviously incredibly important for your customers, but you also now have to be seen as a good energy brand to get investment, because a lot of the investment criteria are changing. Your employees, if I'm working for a company, I want to think that the company I'm working for is good and is sustainable and doing the right thing. So again, it's back to, how do I attract the next generation of workers? Will they come work for me? Am I seen as a good place to work? Am I doing the right thing? So it is fascinating how it's coming back together, and that the energy brand, the brand of a company in the energy space, is becoming far more relevant, because if you're seen as, there's a lot of stuff going on in the press right now about the polluters. So if you're seen as a polluter as opposed to something else, then that can have negative consequences.
Yeah. I think that you bring forth a really good point there, Kevin, with the brands are not just from a retail perspective to charge a higher price or retain customers. They are also internally for those people working for us and the people we want to attract. The energy space hasn't been sexy, if you will, until now. Maybe it's becoming more so, but brands have been shown to be super important to attract and maintain employees. So it's a good point.
Now, I spend most of my time looking at technologies, and I had the honor to do a presentation at the event on future technology. So I was off rambling on about all the stuff that's coming at us, from 3D everything in terms of digital twin of the entire network, wireless charging for electric vehicles. We were chatting about voice assistants and. Does technology, right? You mentioned at the very start that as companies start engaging more with their end customers, you have chatbots, you have voice assistants. You can't stop technology. It's some people would say it's a required evil, but innovation's not going away. Does technology help, or does it make it more difficult for a company to establish a brand and keep a brand?
No, I don't see how it can make it harder. I think let's think about a simplified version of an energy company provides a service. So it's a service. You can differentiate the service. And we don't really care whether we are serviced by a human sometimes or a bot. If it's a simple process, we just want a price or just something simple, we want to do it. We want to go online. Well, actually, at least younger generations, we want to go online, do something, and have problem resolved, not waiting for anyone. If it's a more complex product or complex service, we oftentimes want to talk to someone. So we have to have a mix of this. We have to have a mix of, you want to serve yourself or having a person doing it. And for self-service, obviously, technology is hugely important. But I cannot see it being in the way unless the company itself believes so much in it that it forces their clients to use service that they don't want to. I mean, from technical services. Because at the end of the day, we want to have a human relationship. We want to talk to humans. So don't be that much tacky that you forget about the human element. So back to my point in the beginning, be human. If you're doing it with a lot of tech aid, be human about that also if you can.
And that was one of the key takeaways from the conference, was the love, the show you're human. It's human to human, and getting that balance right. And one of the other things, there was a session during the conference on sonic branding, and with the importance of voice and digital assistants and podcasts, and just the amount of using sound as a way of branding your company. And what voice do I hear from the chatbot or from whatever? That was just, to me, was like, okay, I never thought of that, right? And it's kind of back to the human, making it human, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the senses that we have, we can touch stuff, we can hear, we can smell. So that's just simulating one visual element. Sorry, my English is lacking. That's just one more thing that, you know, we need to touch people. And if you think about you're at home and the television might be on and you might be working on your laptop or just doing something in your phone or something. And when you hear something, then you start to listen. You look at the ad at the telly or whatever. So voices or sounds are definitely one more hook that a good brand needs to have to connect with the clients or the customer group they are talking to. So when do you think that we can have a smell also? You know, you're in your home and something happening, all of a sudden you smell something, and that's your technical instrument sending out smell to, you know, to help you understand something. You know?
When we publish this, we'll put all of the links to yourself and your personal contacts to the company. Are you going to be at any events in the near future where people can meet you?
Yes, I'll be in Paris in next month. And so, yeah, I'm all over all the time, basically. But online is best, probably.
And that's European Utility Week up in Paris, right?
Yeah. And we will have some interesting developments there.
Hey, Fridrik, I enjoyed our chat and thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for talking with me.